reviews and government reports. He and his wife of 55 years live in Tucson, Arizona, and they have two sons and four grandchildren. And we're very happy to have you here, Professor Holmes, and go right ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I hope that I can run this kind of like I used to do my classes. That was pretty much open up. I'll say a few words, and if I don't mind being interrupted at all, just say if you've got a question, just let me know. I tell you a little bit about what I've been doing. I taught at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee for a year and a half, and then moved down to Tucson actually, I went into political science. And then I went into American Indian Studies when they created the program. I I started working actually in the 80s because on really actually on Native veterans. I wrote an article way back when on Indian veterans or Indian participation in World War II, and then I began a long-term study, just going around and interviewing Native veterans of Vietnam. That resulted in another book that it was published in '96, and it was Strong Hearts, Wounded Souls, study of Native veterans of the war in Vietnam. Several other books came along. I was asked to do one for Chelsea House, and that was Indians of World War II, Code Talkers and Warriors. And then I, just kind of kept going along that same vein, and I guess I got some notice, and then 12 asked me to do the bio of Ira Hayes, and found out some really interesting kinds of things about him, and especially I think about the reservation where he came from Gila River, the his kind of his upbringing, his growing up, and this sort of thing. What I have to say about him too is that Ira had a pretty difficult life on the reservation. There had been a famine one generation before he was born. Mm. A famine that was very, very bad. It was the lack of water, and then the crops and the animals were started to die off. It's that bad. So there was a lot of things going on. He was in high school at Sacaton, and then he went to Phoenix Indian School for a while, played football and baseball, and went to the Civilian Conservation Corps for a while, and then joined the Marine Corps after in '42. He was sent out to California for boot camp. I always think about this. I can see Ira now pictured on those yellow footprints, and I suppose very many people can. But he went through boot camp, and then he got into parachute school, And so that I found all of these things, about him, just kind of reading around, and found out, of course, that the shoots, as they were called, went through some pretty rigorous training, and they were kind of simultaneously in training at the same time and with the same kinds of training days and things like that the Raiders went through as well. So he was part of the third parachute battalion, and he uh, in other words, he was kind of one of those guys that was in the elite corps, uh, like the Raiders and that sort of thing. And then he was when they dropped both the Raiders and the parachutists because of the exigencies of going to of doing the Pacific campaign. Uh, so, in any case, when he went to Bougainville and he fought on Bougainville, and uh, he was in he was with the parachutists, but they didn't jump anywhere. In any case, they they got rid of or kind of did away with the with both the Raiders and the parachute regiment at the same time. Um, then he went into the Fifth Marine Division when it was forming, and then of course made the landing. He was in the third wave, uh, landing on Iwo Jima. It wasn't too long after that they went up the hill, up Mount Suribachi, and planted the flag. That was the second flag raising, as I'm sure you're all aware. That's when the Rosenthal took actually pictures of the first flag waving, and the most famous picture is actually of the second flag raising. And immediately after it was published, and especially after he won the Pulitzer for it, he was being accused of staging the whole thing, and that proved to be that accusation proved to be false, uh, mainly because the uh, motion pictures that were taken by Sergeant Bill. Maybe one of you knows how to pronounce it. It's Ganast or Ganost.
Ganos.
It's Ganost. Great, thank you. Yeah, and who was later killed. He was actually killed. He was in one of the caves and got buried alive, I suppose. Anyway, the picture itself, of course, I think, like I said, I think others know this. The picture got back to Washington, and immediately they said, well, we want these guys back. And so what happened is that they called on Rene Gagnon to come and tell them who were the flag raisers. Gagnon mentioned a few people. He mentioned John Bradley, who was a corpsman. He mentioned Ira Hayes. He mentioned Frank Sosley. He mentioned Mike Strank, and he mentioned Henry Hansen and himself as part of the six flag raisers. Actually, the solution to the flag, to people who were on who actually raised the flag, wasn't actually solved till 2019.
Hmm.
So that was a real.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm sorry. Oh.
Oh, go ahead, Tom. That was someone off camera.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the flag raisers actually turned out to be
Say that again.
the flag. Hello. The flag raisers.
I think it might even be 15 years.
Sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. yeah. Well, anyway, the last one that was that that actually got acknowledged was in 2019, and that was a guy by the name of Harold Keller. Uh, and before that, in 2016, largely due to a special from the History Channel, that Harold Schultz was recognized as one of the flag raisers. Frank Sosley, Mike Strank, actually Henry Hansen, who Gagnon said was on the flag raising six, but wasn't, were killed, as was Harlan Block, and that was chiefly the function of Ira, complaining that he knew that it was Harlan on that was actually planting the flag, the pole that they got. He was actually doing the planting there. I'm pretty sure that that Ira knew who all the folks on that flag raising were. I'm pretty sure he knew that, but he kind of kept silent, I think, in large part because when he got back, Bradley and Gagnon and him were going on this the seventh war bond tour together, and Bradley had been wounded pretty badly and was on crutches at the time, and Gagnon was going to get married. So I think Ira just kept mum for the whole thing, and of course Ira was kicked off of the thing for going out and drinking. So the he was probably recognized more than the other two, simply because of his background as a Native American, and he was probably, I think, accorded more, you know. I suppose, he went into a bar and everybody would start buying him drinks. So, in large part, he turned out to be, and this is where I started relating with Ira, because Ira was one of those guys who was a binge drinker. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one. I'm pretty sure you are. He would do his work and everything else and do it well, and then go on Saturday night after payday and then get the drinks bought for him and everything else. So his alcoholism was, he wasn't a drunk on every day, like he's been depicted and and then shown in the Peter Lafarge Drunken Ira Hayes ballad of Ira Hayes song. Anyway, his background, Ira's background was, by the way, he died in 1955 at the age of 32. He was, in some ways, I'm kind of amazed that he made it that long. Like I said, it was, in many ways, it was pretty harsh on the reservation. It was difficult to find work. It was difficult, except in the fields. And if you've ever worked in the fields, that's some kind of hard life too. So he had two younger brothers that died, and I believe they were in their 20s. So the family, and then another brother and another sister who died when they were very young as children. He had another brother named Kenny. Kenny served in the Army during Korea and was wounded in action there. of course, he's got this image of being drunk all the time. Uh, Actually, he did quite a bit of activism on the part of Native people. And there was one thing that he got involved in was in California. It was he was he was on the reservation, but he was asked to take part in a rally supporting a woman by the name of Crocker, who was Seneca, I think. In any case, her husband was white, and she had two daughters, and she was living in L.A. And they were in one of, at that time, what was called a restricted uh, neighborhood, which meant that uh, whites only, excluded anybody of color and Jewish people as well. And anyway, the judge ruled that Mrs. Crocker and her daughters had to go. Her husband could stay in the house, but her daughters and her had to leave. So there was a big protest led actually by Will Rogers Jr. And Ira came, and several of the native community in and around Los Angeles joined him, and they went to see the mayor, and they had a big rally and this sort of thing. Well, the the upshot of the whole thing was that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of a lawsuit that was brought by a black family in, I believe it was St. Louis, and they were being evicted because of a restricted neighborhood. And what happened, of course, is they were actually, the Supreme Court ruled that there was no such thing as a restricted neighborhood anymore. You couldn't do that. So Mrs. Crocker was allowed to go back into her home. He was in on that. He was in a John Wayne movie that he actually promoted back in Arizona a few times, and then after his death, there were a good number of I think a good number of people wanting to do his story, and especially in the film. And so there were two movies made after his death. One was a television movie starring I'm sorry, Tony Curtis was in the movie that was released in the theaters, and Lee Marvin was in the other one. They both played Ira in those two films. The Outsider, which was the Tony Curtis film, I thought it was kind of funny because, in a way, because Ira was depicted as kind of an inept, sort of inept and ignorant guy, in which he wasn't at all. He was very, very bright, and he was, of course, he was actually a real good athlete. He Tony Curtis depicted him as kind of this person who had a hard time, and they immediately put another Marine, a white guy, to help Ira out and get him through boot camp. And then it was so against what Ira was really was he was all of his fitness and all this other kind of things, and his grading and all that kind of stuff was very, very good. He was a real good Marine, and probably should have stayed in the Marine Corps. He was kind of the person that was really kind of made for the Corps. He loved it. He loved the camaraderie, and he just he had a particular trick that he did for his buddies in the Corps. He could open beer bottles with his teeth, which made everybody happy for some reason. I would have laughed myself. But yeah, he was kind of a joker. He was a really solid Marine. He made corporal in 45, and this was after he got kicked off the tour, and he went back to his old unit, 27th Marines, and they took part at the first part of the occupation of Japan. So he was there at that time too. Then
he was in the 28th Marines, not the 27th.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, and he was in got which section of it was, but he was in Japan for a couple of months, I think, and then was shipped back home and got out of the Corps. He had a few kind of jobs. He went on what was called relocation in the early 50s. It was a government program by which Native people could get off the reservations, and they were sent to various cities and were expected to get a job and then and then kind of fit into the rest of society. He ended up in Chicago, and was on that. He had actually held down a few jobs there, and I'm reading. So anyway, he had a few jobs in Chicago, and then got drunk and decided he was going to get out of Chicago. And Dean Martin's ex-wife hired him as a driver and a bodyguard for their children in Los Angeles. So he went out there, and he went on a binge later on out there, and then was much too embarrassed to go back, and so he came home to Gila River. And there he would go on various jobs and all that stuff. I got a hold of his death certificate, and what they reported that he had died of alcohol consumption and that sort of thing. But I was thinking about this, and I checked the weather reports on the night that he died. That night that he died, it was 29 degrees in Phoenix. Oof. And if you have ever been out in the desert during that time, and it's a couple of degrees out on the desert lower than in Phoenix usually, and so he died actually of hypothermia, and and I started thinking about that because the doctor actually said on his death certificate that he died of exposure and alcohol. And of course, the alcohol, if you have it running in your veins and that sort of thing at night when it's very cold, that'll exacerbate the hypothermia. So I was looking around trying to find out what he was drinking. And one of his brothers, this is before the brother died, reported that they were in a card game with a couple of other folks, and they were drinking wine and some pretty cheap wine. So I'm not sure how much he was. I don't know how much he consumed, but as you know, wine it doesn't have as high a alcohol content as say whiskey or something on that order. So as I said, the average age at time, the average age of mortality for Native Americans at that time was about 45. So he was living not only in harsh conditions, but there were he had his bouts with the liquor as well. Working out in Los Angeles and working in Chicago, I'm pretty sure that Ira, he wrote some letters that would say, well, I'm glad to be out here and I'm making a living, but I've got to stop the drinking. He wanted to stop very, very badly on many occasions. But I think that what happens in that case and it becomes I found out also that there was a different attitude towards drinking in that period of time in the late 40s and early 50s. It was something that you did for relaxation and for field workers and kind of the blue collar guys. That's what you did on the weekends. And so I think that Ira got caught up in that. And of course, after his death, what happens is not only does he become kind of an object that you want to have in the films, but also he becomes kind of a symbol for a renewed anti-liquor movement. There were several meetings and especially religious meetings for go back to the 1920s in many cases. But of course that was a flop too. But but nevertheless, there were a good number of people that wanted to do that and use his name often enough to try and to combat against the alcohol and alcoholism. At that time, also there was nothing really about there was nothing really about post-traumatic stress. They would have words like combat fatigue, the 1,000-yard stare, and that sort of thing. But by and large, he didn't have a kind of he was thinking about going into Alcoholics Anonymous, but at the same time, there wasn't a real, kind of strong chapter or that sort of thing where he lived. So anyway, that's just kind of the kind of basic outline of what I did with the book. I think that the main thing, though, and this is what I've been doing for since at least 80, and talking to Native veterans, especially of Vietnam, is looking into post-traumatic stress. And there's a lot of it that went unnoticed for the guys who went into World War II and the guys who went to Korea. And as a matter of fact, a lot of it was that if they felt stressed out or something like that, somebody would tell them, "Well, let's have a drink," and that sort of thing. So, alcohol was seen a little bit differently at the time. Relax, have a shot of whiskey or something on that, or have a beer. So, like I said, it was just a different attitude towards it. It seems. The movies seem to depict him as having started drinking when he was in the service. I kind of question that. I don't think that he drank any more than anybody else who he was hanging around with. They'd have a beer or two, of course. He was on for a while. He was on Bella La Bella. I can't pronounce it. Anyway, he was on that island for a while, and they were in training, and it went in preparation for the landings on Bougainville. That's another thing that was kind of overlooked in his service. He was already a veteran of combat by the time he went into Iwo Jima. Might say also that you guys probably know this as well, is that Bougainville was quite a different place than was Iwo Jima, and a different kind of jungle. Well, it wasn't a jungle as much as it was a bombed out place. And of course, Iwo Jima itself had a bunch of sulfur mines there. So even the place kind of stunk of rotten eggs all the time. You'd hear about this from some of the guys that were there. So anyway, that's just about it. The book isn't selling well right right now, so I hope it does though. In any case, I'd like to ask or answer some questions if I can.
Could I make a comment?
Yes.
Colonel Severance, who was his CO of E-228, always told me that he had no problem with drinking with Ira when he was his CO, and he was in the third parachute too on Bella with him too. And Bob Mueller, who went through boot camp with him and was in the shoot school and Bob was in dog company on Iwo, but Bob said he never had that kind of drinking problem until he while they were together either. He said he drank like everybody else, but nothing like he did later. But I just wanted to add that it seemed that his drinking came after he got out of the Marine Corps. And
yeah, I believe that too, and I think you're absolutely right on that one. And he, I think that some of the stress got to him, and also he was just joining with the other guys that were working in the fields, and I think that his main part of the drinking and that kind of behavior came from that. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what Colonel Severance always said too, and Bob Mueller.
Yeah. I sure would like to have talked to them. A little late.
Colonel Severance just died. I've got a book that he wrote, my Iwo Jima saga, that's available there. And Bob, Colonel just died at 102, 2 or 3 years ago, and Bob died about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
They both of them used to talk to me about Ira Hayes and all the stuff in the 5th Marine Division when I was editing Spearhead for the 5th.
Do you know if he?
Gail,
Do you know if he went,
Go ahead. Go.
do you know if he went through jump school at Gillespie Field near San Diego?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that was it.
Okay. Not back at Benning with the Army.
No.
Okay.
No.
And this is more of an anthropological question.
Mm-hmm.
We all speak of nations and tribes as Native Americans,
Mm-hmm.
but is it not true that all so-called Native Americans actually crossed the ice bridge and came here just as we did from another part of the world.
Well, all right. If you know, I guess I don't uh, I don't agree with that. That the ice bridge. There are a lot of problems with it. Uh, for one thing, they say an ice-free corridor going through the uh, through this massive, 4 mile thick glacier that covers most of North America.
Right.
So that's kind of hard to believe. It would take. I used to joke around. I said, "Yep, they say that we got us. They got my ancestors finally crawled up on top of the ice glacier, and then slid down to Florida." But that wasn't the case at all.
Okay, but then how does one justify the fact that the Athabascans up in Canada and the Navajos, who speak of coming out of Mother Earth, how is it that they basically speak the same language? And if one thinks of coming from Canada to Arizona, where the Navajos are, going down into the Grand Canyon would be like coming out of Mother Earth if you survived it and came up the other side.
Yeah, the languages do show that, and the Navajos did come from the north, and yeah, that's true. But there were already people in the area when they came in as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
According to our president, Greenland opened up.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that one.
I said according to Mr. Trump, Greenland's going to be opened up soon.
Gonna have to wrest it away from Denmark, I guess. Oh well.
President Trump last night said sooner or later we're going to get it.
And the Panama Canal, and I don't know what else.
So Tom, from your research and in your book, how could you probably give us some ideas about how uncomfortable Ira was when he was paraded around the country in regards to these bond measures and stuff like that?
I think that what was going on was that that he was very happy at first on the tour. He was having fun and meeting all these people and things like that. But he started catching, especially in some of the larger cities, he would start getting the kind of racist stuff, thrown on him and that kind of thing. So I think he started enjoying it less after a while. But he wrote to his mother, saying, "Yeah, I'm having a good time. This is going to be great." And then it was, like I said, less and less.
Well, the story I always heard, and I'm not sure it's accurate, but he said he threatened Gagnon if he named him as one of the flag raisers. I don't know if that's true or not. But.
He did. Yeah, it was aboard ship, as a matter of fact. They were standing there, and he found out that Gagnon was going to go back home and stuff like that, and they wanted, and that Rene was going to tell who raised the flag, and Ira didn't want to do it. He wanted to stay with his unit, and that was one of the things about him too, that I really believe that he should have stayed in, because he really, really loved being in the Marine Corps,
like another family to him.
It really was.
Yeah,
that's true.
Maybe a better family.
Yeah, about the Native American kind of that has gone. Okay, I grew up in Oklahoma on res, and and we always said we were Indians. So and then it kind of started switching, and then it was well, Native American, and then now the running term is indigenous. Which I found kind of funny, because that's indigenous can be a plant too. So
Mhm.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe I'm a little crazy. I don't know. But,
John, I intersect here as a psychologist of sorts that, um, having read quite a bit about Ira and his wife, and I now have your book, sir. I'm your last buyer. No, I'm your first of your last group of buyers.
yeah,
The what the Marine Corps did for Ira was give him a sense of self-worth.
I think so. Yes.
And that self-worth is what kept him going. And having read so much about him, I came up with the same uh, idea that if he had been able to stay in the Corps, it would have made all the difference in the world.
Amen.
Because
I think so too.
that was his extended family. That was a place where he was respected. That was a place that treated him properly. And what happened? He bombed out in Chicago, as you know, getting really drunk one night and getting into some fisticuffs and winding up in the jail. And then when the jail people found out who he was, they called the Marine Corps. And that was 2 weeks. And I think that as Marines want to do when they are not home, they write mother and automatically tell her everything's okay.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think he was telling her the truth. He didn't want his mother to worry.
No.
That's what we mothers do. We're made to worry. That's the way the good Lord made us. So I really think that having known some Native Americans and knowing that they have a very shy personality, that this whole bond drive thing was just absolutely the antithesis of the environment that he grew up in and that he understood, and that was where he felt comfortable. He did not feel comfortable at all being out there, which is why he told Gagnon not to tell anybody, and then Gagnon, opened his big mouth when Schreier came along and said, "I need a list of the people." Also, talking to Iron Mike Mertosh from Camp Pendleton, legend who passed away in 2017, I asked him, I said, "What is that bump on Ira's back?" And he said, "Oh, that's his Indian blanket." I said, "Oh, well, okay." He said, "The Indians were allowed to carry their blankets with them," which I think, quite frankly, is a very smart move that some people may want to repeat, whether they're indigenous, Native American, or whatever. But Ira was a very sensitive man, I think. A very sensitive man, because you find people with high intelligence who can be extremely sensitive. And, I think he had the smarts. He had the ability to succeed. With respect to the 29 code talkers, I found the original book about what they did. They were holed up at Camp Elliott for 1 week. They were told they had to come up with a code in 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
And I have read the entire, even written my name in Navajo just for fun. But the point I want to make is that they had to use the language, the Navajo language, to convey an image of some kind if they could. Like airplanes were represented by different types of birds. All right.
Right.
So that part was kind of easy. Then they got to the harder part. But I think the most profound part of it was that when I learned what Navajo word they used for America, they used the Navajo word mother. And I thought their loyalty to the mission, they were Americans. And what really threw me off the reservation was a couple months ago when I realized that these men fighting for us were not allowed to vote because they were Native Americans. That was a just total and complete disgrace that nobody seems to, tamper on. But I'm tampering on it right now, just letting you all know. So with due respect, thank you for listening.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Laura.
That was very true. We Well, at least in Arizona. We actually had the vote though before that in Oklahoma, uh, because of the allotment period. That's another story. But in Arizona, yeah, if you were from the reservation, you didn't get to vote. So in
Did you
Arizona.
vote if you were mixed race?
Uh, no, they had a deal on that one too. It depended on how much you were. Uh,
So
if,
would I assume
if
that the Civil Rights Act of 1965 solved that problem?
actually they had a 40 in 48. They had a federal law that said Indians can vote all over. So
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Well,
So
And
that
Tom,
was kind of it. Yeah. Yeah.
and Tom, just as a side bar from Oklahoma, did you ever run into Jim Thorpe at all? The legendary Jim Thorpe.
Oh, no, I was much too young.
But I thought he might have come back to Oklahoma from time
He
to time.
he did on a couple of occasions, but that was that was during God, that was in the early 50s. So I was a little guy back then. Yeah. I know that I look that old, but damn.
No, you don't. You don't at all. Do you have an idea why Ira did leave the Marine Corps?
I think he
Yes.
wanted to get back to the reservation. He was worried about his folks, and that
Yep.
sort of thing. And so, he uh, the folks I talked to, and that there's nobody on the reservation that had much to do with him. They were all kids at the time, and when he died, and and I miss talking to Kenny, his brother, who died in 2019. So anyway, uh, there was, and Ira had no children. He was never married. Uh, but he's very much revered on the reservation too. Um, he the folks that said there were two schools of them that would talk about how he was when he was in high school and when he came back. Um, one side said that he really, really loved to joke around with people. And then there were other side that, said that he was very quiet, very shy. And so, and it was hard to see on some occasions, it's hard to see that the shyness when he was doing stuff in the Marine Corps. I mean, he's making jokes with folks. He kind of took Frank Sousley under his arm because this was Franklin's first combat experience on Iwo Jima, and he was teasing him one time when Sousley was in one of the first patrols going up on Suribachi, and Ira, before he took off, before Sousley left, he built a little graveyard with little mounds of dirt, like a graves, and sat there and smiled at Sousley and before he went up on the hill. And so that was one of his jokes. It was kind of like this bonding that an old vet has with the boot that comes in the company. So that's what I got out of it. He liked to joke. And the whole business I found out about the beer bottle stuff kind of got to me too. But yeah, but there's a lot of folks back at Gila River that describe him as a very, very shy and introverted person. And I don't know if that was his if he was that introverted before he left or after he came back or whatever it was. I really can't make a statement on that. but it's a kind of juggling two positions in that.
Did you have one or two key sources in your research that you really depended upon?
I really depended on the newspapers of the period. He was perhaps he got more Ira got more write-ups in the newspapers than Geronimo. Yeah, he was Luella Parsons, I think it was, who was the kind of the movie wrote about the movie business and things like that. Was even had an idea, or she got some inside information that he was going to play a character, and he was going to be the lead in some film about Indian people, but that never came to pass.
Gil, you had a question?
Yeah, Tom, you mentioned his mother and his siblings, as long as they lived anyway, except for Kenny. What do you know about his father?
His father was he was born in 1902, I think. So he was of that, and his mother too. His dad was I forgot when both of them passed on, but he was a hardworking man, very very small guy. He was very very short, very small, and more or less kind of kept to himself. There are a couple of interesting pictures that I got a hold of in the book that show Ira's mom and dad with Tony Curtis, and then Ira's mom and dad at the funeral. It's kind of interesting. There's a picture that I found too of Renee Gagnon kind of consoling Ira's mom at the funeral. Got to say one thing, even though that Ira was often mad at Renee. Renee stuck with him. Renee went to his funeral and the whole thing. Jack Bradley didn't, by the way. Didn't go to the funeral.
Mr. Hickey, you've got a question?
Yeah, Tom, the two things, well, a couple of things. The title of your book, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. The most recent.
It's Ira Hayes, the Akimel Award, the Akimel
Okay.
Warrior, World War II, and the Price of Heroism.
Okay, and the other thing that it was kind of interesting. I only realized it recently in reading a book that there were actually code talkers in the First World War.
Yes,
I don't remember what tribe it was, but I do remember reading about that, and they were used basically for the same thing that the Marines used the Navajo code talkers. And then there was there was a more recent movie too and Ira was played by a Native American actor, but I don't remember his name, and it was a few years ago, I think.
Yeah, it was
anyway,
I think that was the movie was Flags of Our Fathers. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Bradley.
Is that what's on it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was by John Bradley's son. Yeah. And
right. Yeah, I read the book. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ira was played by Adam Beach.
Okay.
Yeah. And Beach, actually Adam Beach got several good reviews for playing Ira in that movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the First World War, do you know what tribe?
There were a couple actually, and they were actually on telephones because
okay.
And they were Choctaws from Mississippi and Oklahoma that could speak Choctaw, and they developed that kind of code as well. During a good friend of mine, his name is Bill Meadows, has written a couple of books about code talkers and code and stuff like that. So Meadows is a real good source for all that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
To the best of your knowledge, were there any code talkers in the Korean or Vietnam Wars?
To the best of my knowledge, there weren't. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think, during World War II, there were actually quite a few. There were some Hopis that were in the Army, and then in the Pacific Theater, and then there were the Comanche code talkers, but they were pretty small groups though. Like I think there were less than 20 Comanche code talkers in the Army, and I think they were the 4th Division, but I'm not certain about that one.
By then, we developed crypto anyway.
Yeah, and Ira, I'm sorry, Navajo code talkers there got to be about 400 of them all told. Yeah, so it was quite a big outfit.
Yeah.
And to this day, I don't know in what kind of service. I think they were in the Signal Corps, but I'm not sure.
In the Army?
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think that, the Signal Corps itself had something to do with getting the Comanches in there, and then with the Hopis and a few others.
There's a big code talker monument in Gallup, New Mexico. Is there one in DC or elsewhere?
I think that I think that their names are put up. I think that's in Window Rock. I'm not sure.
If you go to the capital of Arizona, Phoenix,
yeah,
in the capital, there's quite a monument to frontline fire, police, submarines, the USS Arizona, and a wonderful statue in commemoration of the code talkers.
Code talkers, yeah.
So all those different units have their own monument, Gary?
Yes, it's huge. It's just a big walkway from one point. In fact, there's guns from the Nevada, I think one from the Arizona, but really a nice monument to the code talkers. Then inside the actual Capitol, there's a museum there dedicated to the USS Arizona.
Yeah.
Wow.
And at the University of Arizona too, they have a room dedicated to the battleship.
Right, and in the mall, if you really want to get technical, they went 608 feet length of that ship, 97 feet across the beam, and there's bricks the full outline of that particular ship. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty nifty. Steve Spiller, you had a question early on in the chat that I didn't quite understand. Do you want to ask our speaker about that?
Yeah, let me. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Tom, you talk in your book about the care that the Native Americans processed the Indians that had came back from battle. And can you compare that to what we don't do today, or we are doing today?
Well, a lot of the tribes are trying to revive some of this kind of stuff, but I think that in Ira's time, they really had the Akimel Autumn had some very, very elaborate ceremonies to bring the warrior back into society. They made a distinct line between warfare and peace, and you had to cross that line ceremonially. So you would have ceremonies to go to war, and then the big ceremony to come back, especially if you took a life during a war. Back in the day, it was a 16-day isolation with a medicine man. And they would go down to the river and they would be bathed every day, and they couldn't touch themselves and things like this. where they couldn't touch their hair and they couldn't do certain things, and they had to eat certain ways and that sort of thing. But it was all in a transition and a cleansing ceremony to kind of to do this. I went through a thing called going to water, and that was where every morning you'd get up and for 7 days and actually be cleansed. And so I got back in December of '68, and it was pretty cold doing the ceremony. But yeah, that was one thing that I tried to get across in the book I did on Vietnam veterans, is that these cleansing ceremonies are set up usually by families, and cleansing and honor ceremonies and things like that. I think mitigated some of the problems associated with PTSD. Now, didn't make it go away, because there's still the nightmares and still the jumpiness and this kind of thing, but it might have aided in pretty good measure. And see, Ira was raised as a Presbyterian, so all he got at that time was he didn't get this kind of cleansing ceremony or anything like that. What he got is, he came home and they would tell him, well, have go pray or something on that order. So that was, that's okay. That's if that does it. But I believe that those healing ceremonies that the tribes developed over the years, over those many, many years, do help. And I'd really like to see that developed all around.
It seems like that's something that, I was going to say the VA, but any number of places helping veterans and others who've gone through trauma should be studying what the Indians are doing.
Well, I was on a commission for the VA in the '80s, and we gave them that idea, but I don't think anything was really done on that. I think that I think that they were worried about money. I don't know.
Always.
Yeah. So and there was a special desk that was set up for Native veterans in the VA. But I think that's probably one of the things that's going to go away pretty quick.
Well, listen, thank you so much for sharing Ira's story with us. I think we've all have a different appreciation than when we started today. And you had a very kind comment, Tom, in the chat that said, thank you for keeping this important history alive. And I want to add my thanks to that as well, and to you for being here with us today. So
I'd sure like to thank everybody who how do you say this? Is this an attendance, or is this just or do you say thank you to everyone who zoomed?
Yeah, I say audience. I'm not sure that's proper, but that's what I say. And we have a number of our Joe Rosenthal chapter members here, and then a greater audience, mostly of veterans and those who try to appreciate this history are joining us today.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question of you old Marines? When did they bring in the thing saying "oorah"? Because I wasn't familiar with that.
That was in Vietnam, I'm pretty sure, because in our Marine Corps League here, we had an Iwo Jima veteran And after a meeting was over one time, everybody went, "Hoorah!" And he said, "What the hell is that?" I said, "We didn't do that shit in World War II." So I think it was Vietnam. I'm pretty sure it was.
Well, yeah, well, I'd never heard of it
Yeah,
myself.
well, I'd never heard of it either.
And we always used to say Semper Fi, as I remember.
Yeah, Semper
Yeah.
Fi, do or die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, to all you out there, Semper Fi, thank you very, very much for having me. I appreciate it.
And gung
Thank you,
ho for
Professor
the older
Gun
Gun
ones.
ho.
What
Gung ho.
unit were you with in Vietnam, Tom? Radio telephone operator. He killed